I think the place that it starts is being able to make an itemized list of the things that actually need to get done, because we are talking generational changes here, right? Like, and so, you know, and my husband's mother is a very independent, very strong woman, and but there's still generational expectations that need to be broken. And I think that bringing to the forefront, right? We talk about awareness and we talk about mindfulness. These are the ways that you can do this every day, is by actually writing down that list of everything that needs to be done, because it's not about helping one or the other as much as it is about being a team for a greater purpose of what your family is.
Today, we have an inspiring guest whose mission is to empower ambitious women leaders to thrive without the weight of burnout. Meet Dr. Camilla Moore, a true force of nature who turned her own struggles with burnout into a transformative journey. With 16 years of clinical expertise and a deep understanding of lifestyle medicine, she guides women to prioritize themselves while achieving their business goals. As a diplomate of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and a certified Harvard SMART program instructor, Dr. Moore combines her professional knowledge with personal experience to help her clients identify hidden stressors and create a balanced life. Through her online programs and personalized coaching, she's redefining what success looks like, one that nourishes your energy rather than depleting it. Get ready to discover how you can build a thriving business that aligns with your values and sustains your well being. Let's dive into the conversation with Dr. Camilla Moore. And thank you so much, Dr. Moore, for being here today. It is such a pleasure to have you. And I just listening to your journey, we were talking a few days ago about what you've been through, all the ups and downs, and I'm so excited for everyone to hear what you have been through and how you came on the other side of it. And I wanted to start first off with burnout, because that is something you talk about all over your social media, what you've experienced, what I've experienced, but I think so many other entrepreneurs have really had to endure in that process of building a business from the ground up. But I really want to know, can you share a pivotal moment when you recognize the signs of burnout in yourself and how that experience really shaped your approach to helping others?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. There is actually this one moment that I talk about, and it really stood out. And it was just, I had I'll set the stage for you a little bit. I had sold my first business, which was a multi six-figure business, my practice, but I was still doing work for a big healthcare company as a consultant. And I we'd gone through a big fertility run. It was COVID. I had been pregnant through COVID, had had my baby through COVID, was taking care of patients through COVID, and we stayed open. And I was exhausted. I was really exhausted. And I remember driving to work, and this was through the city, and it was early in the morning, and it was quiet, like a city is quiet in the morning. And I came off the interstate, and there's a stoplight at the end, and you can't make a left-hand turn. You have to go straight. And I remember sitting there, and all of a sudden, every fiber in my being wanted to just go home, like to turn around and just not even show up for work. And it wasn't that I wanted to quit, I just needed this break. And I even felt like my muscles in my shoulders start to engage as I wanted to make that illegal left-hand turn that nobody would have seen, but maybe the cameras would have picked up and I would have gotten a ticket later, which has happened, but that's another story for another day. And I sat there, and the light turned green, and I did what so many of us, especially women, do, which is I took a breath and I put my big girl pants on and I went to work. And I set that side of myself that needed something and needed an attention, I set that aside again for what I needed to do in front of me at that moment, which was my job. But this time, and this is why I remember it, I remember instead of just that piece being set aside, I really felt it disappear. And what I didn't realize was that time after time after time of having to do that, and it was beginning to build through like the fertility journey and the COVID journey and all of those, the pregnancy and the postpartum, all of those little moments where you say, I'll deal with this later. I need to have, there's something more important right now. All of those little times were accumulating. And I didn't know it at the time because I was physically going to work. I was physically doing this, right? And I was still like, once I got there, I would get into a rhythm and I'd be okay. But it was starting to take its toll until, and I ignored it and convinced myself that it was just fatigue or, whatever it was, until I really crashed. And one day I just couldn't even get out of bed. And that was, my wake up call where I just never, I actually had felt this way before. I had had Lyme disease several years ago, and it was very similar to that, where like my mind wasn't working right. I had these aches and pains, and I just had no energy. And, but it wasn't, I went to the doctor and I got tested. It was complete burnout. And that was a pivotal moment for me because I was doing all of the right things at the time. I was still exercising. I was still eating well. I was still practicing meditation. I was getting as much sleep as I could, prioritizing it. But those weren't that wasn't the problem. And I really had to take a big step back, zoom out, take a 30,000-foot view of what was going on, and take inventory of where all of this was coming from.
It's so important that you said that because I think just everything that you had gone through, especially with infertility, COVID, pregnancy, postpartum, running a successful practice, managing relationships as well, managing your own health, doing all the right things that you're supposed to do to make sure that we're healthy from the inside out, but it still happened. And I think that's
Mhm.
a really pivotal part of it, all of this is knowing you could still be doing everything, but you're not addressing other things that are happening. Like it's almost like we go on autopilot. This is like, okay, well, I'm going to show up. I'm going to do what I need to do for my clients and my practice and everything else. But then the overall aspect of our emotional health, our mental health, that might not be addressed, that can turn into
Mhm.
burnout if we're not identifying that. And I'm really curious, were there any identifying stressors that were really a common hidden stressor that you might have experienced or what you see with ambitious women leaders that are often overlooked? And how do we start to address those in our daily lives?
I think it's a great question. And for me personally, we had my son, and a lot of, I at the time, represented the bulk of women, which means that we have not only moved into the workplace space and become very successful, whether that's in as an employee in a career, or whether that's a business owner, an entrepreneur, or a healthcare provider. We've moved into this economic space, but socially, we still handle the bulk of the childcare and the household responsibilities and the mental load. We have these terms now that are coming out, and I love it because finally there is a way to, communicate what we have been feeling for so long, and that mental load, the invisible load that women carry of just organizing the life. That was part of it. And so much of it had to do, there were two main parts. One was that I was really burnt out from caregiving as a profession. In the day-to-day, like seeing 20 or 30 patients a day, dealing with the insurance companies, the business of healthcare, like that component of it, I was really fatigued with. And the other component was just now my husband and I had to re-navigate what our roles looked like at home because it's still, the fertility journey was all on me. And listen, I married the good guy, 10 out of 10, highly recommend. Like, he's a wonderful man. But this is the point, is that we have societal systemic expectations that are still marked in these traditional gender roles that need to be broken. And it's not just, it can, I think it can happen from the inside out, but we also see it, at my husband's job, like, he's not, the one that's going to be expected from his position to be leaving the office to take my child to his doctor's appointment, or to, when he's sick, to like be the one that leaves work. Like, there are also expectations, I think, of traditional men in those situations that are a product as well of the systemic expectations that we have. And so for me, a lot of it was being able to, my husband and I being able to like say, wait a minute, we need to reevaluate this a little bit or a lot. And it just led to a lot of really great conversations, and more importantly, a lot of great action.
I love that. And it's communication in action, right? Because you can
Mhm.
say one thing, but then do another thing, but it's followed through with those actions. And I love that you said, like, he's 10 out of 10. And that's maybe not the norm for a lot of individuals, that they might have the husband or the spouse has a really high power job and can't leave the office, and that traditional role that has society on a systemic level has been what it's been. But I feel like so many more women now are owning their own businesses, are so empowered, and there's more like stay-at-home dads now. There's been like a little
Mhm.
shift, not huge, but a little shift in that, and just being able to recognize, I think it's like removing the gender roles and focusing on how can we communicate of like what I need versus what the other person needs to pick up. And there's Brene Brown talks about this. I love Brene Brown, but she talks about how even with her marriage, I saw this years ago, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, but she was talking about how sometimes it's she can only give 60. So her husband kind of has to pick up the other slack, that she can't be 100% every day, and vice versa. And when I was a couples therapist, I would explain it as like a treadmill or an elliptical, where it's like, okay, sometimes like you're moving back and forth. It might be 80-20, 60-40, 70-30, based off of what's going on. But I think it's being able to have those conversations, the hard conversations
Mhm.
of like, what do I really need in order to reduce that stress? Because it's a lot, even if is there's a lot of single women as well that are mothers that are doing everything themselves as well, being able to navigate that, or having a village around you to help. And not everyone has that directly around them, but I think it's having those conversations and asking for what you need. Because I know when I burnt out, and a big part of that was just not asking for help and not like identifying like, okay, I can't do all of this on my own, even without children beforehand. And now even being pregnant, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of things that
Mhm.
are shifting, and having to ask for help more so than I would want to. Because a lot of times when we're ambitious women, like, I got it, I can do it. But when you have the whole weight on your back, it's a little hard to continue to move forward.
Yeah, I have, and there are just a couple of thoughts that I have as you were talking. The first of which is, I think the place that it starts is being able to make an itemized list of the things that actually need to get done, because we are talking generational changes here, right? Like, and so, you know, and my husband's mother is a very independent, very strong woman. And but there's still generational expectations that need to be broken. And I think that bringing to the forefront, right? We talk about awareness and we talk about mindfulness. These are the ways that you can do this every day, is by actually writing down that list of everything that needs to be done, because it's not about helping one or the other as much as it is about being a team for a greater purpose of what your family is. And the other component, so I was really shy even with my son, who's 4 years old, to say, will you help mama? Because I don't want to continue that where all he sees mama doing this work and like his job as his little boy is to help his mom. It's really, we're all a family and we're all a team and we all live in this space and we eat in this space and we do laundry in this space. And so how are we going to live together and be able to designate the tasks accordingly so that we can all enjoy each other better, and more fully? The other thing that I was going to say, and my mom brain is kicking in just a smidge, just a
Doesn't go away. So I
You
get
said, yes. And I lost that train of thought. You said something about, you were talking about, I lost it, Dr. C. I'm so sorry.
it.
It'll come
It'll
back
come
to me.
back. No, but I agree. I think that generational aspect of just what our children are viewing, what our families like, is even my mom, very independent. I mean, her and my dad, like, she worked really hard, but she also had some of those traditional roles too. Like, it was just an expectation based off of even my grandma, because my grandma was a single mom of two. And she had to do all the things on her own. I mean, of course, she had like my great grandparents' support, but it was her doing it. So
Yep.
come from a background of very strong independent women, and I feel like a lot of people do, but there's still this expectation of like cooking and cleaning and like doing all the
Mhm.
things that traditionally from generations prior
Mhm.
have. And I think that's part of just realizing it is a team effort. And like, there's things that like for my husband and I like don't like putting the dishes in the dishwasher, and like he doesn't like how I do it, and I don't like how he puts away the dishes. So like we have like that system of he puts them in, I put them away. Same with laundry, but it's like knowing it's not just on one person. It is
Mhm.
that team effort, and like I grew up in sports and team aspect because you can't win a game all by yourself unless it's an individual sport. And I think it's going back to what you said. It's everybody participates, everybody's a part of it because it's for a greater good and that team aspect.
Absolutely. And I remember what I was going to say, which was, I knew it would come back eventually. Uh, the One of the other things that I have come to appreciate more and more is seeing these components as a part of my business success. And
Mm.
that is, because it's all wrapped up, right? We talk about this work and life balance, which I think is a little BS. I think we all kind of recognize that, like, that's just not, it implies that there's this 50-50, bit to it, that like, but it also implies that those two things are separate identities. And really, what we are is like, this is our life, our entire life. And where we spend our time in those 24 hours, or, during the 7 days of a week, or 30 days of the month, or 365 days of the year, how we spend that time and divvy up that time becomes our life. And so when we try to separate the stress from home and the stress from work, it's not going to be as effective as recognizing that you are the entity, you are the key. And so when we talk about protecting, I teach a burnout proof business, how to burnout proof your business, right? And so what we teach is you are your greatest asset. You are your greatest asset, especially as a small business owner or a solopreneur, or, like you and I were like in private practice where like it's you. And so how do you protect that greatest asset? And when we start shifting the perspective, I run, like that's my thing. Every morning, like I'm out there, I'm running. It's a way to clear my head. I do not practice mindfulness when I run. It's my time to just, let my creativity, I take notes on my phone, like it's my time. That is my first business meeting of the day. And I don't look at that as anything. Yes, it's true for my health. I know all the benefits of cardiovascular and weight loss and blah, 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 blah. But it's my first business meeting. And that sets the tone for the entire day, both in my life and my work, because I clear my head, I'm more motivated, I am more focused, I am more productive on every aspect of my life. My brain works better, my body works better, everything. And so when we start looking at you as an asset, you as the most important part of your business, then we can see, like, these kind of concerns about, how do we set boundaries without guilt? How do we do these really common and very real concerns? They start to fade away because you've identified what is the most important thing to you, and how do you live your life based on that.
Oh, I love that you brought that up because I was definitely going to ask you about work-life integration because I don't
Mhm.
believe in balance. I believe
Yeah.
in that harmony. And I love how you beautifully touched on that of just prioritizing. And I do the similar thing. I have like my hardest things I do first thing in the morning, get those out of the way. So I know, okay, I feel accomplished. I know I got moving the needle forward in my businesses and no matter what that looks like each day, because
Mhm.
it's going to be a little different every day. But I love that you talked about boundaries because I'm the queen of boundaries because I had none before and I didn't know how to set a boundary. And I think part of that is realizing what are the priorities? How do you really identify, just like with the running, it's not your time for mindfulness, it's time, it's a business meeting, all the
Mhm.
creativity is flowing, you're allowed to kind of take a step back and allow yourself to think more freely versus I got to do this, I got to do that, like all the things, and that can become overwhelming and stressful. And that's when burnout can sometimes happen in a different way because you're not addressing the things that need to get done, just like you said, the itemized list. These are the things
Mhm.
that have to get done versus like just talking about it or not
Mhm.
doing something about it. And I think part of just like even what you do is like helping people prevent burnout based
Mhm.
off of your experience and whatnot. But I kind of want to go back a little bit to the beginning of
Sure.
why did you decide to start your own practice? What was like in the beginning? Did you always know you wanted to start? And what did that look like?
I knew I wanted autonomy. I knew I wanted to. I don't do well. I don't do well with people telling me what to do, and so I wanted to have that agency over what I was doing. And I enjoy working hard. I am self-motivated, like a lot of us are. It just was never going to be an issue of like work ethic or, any of that. But I wanted to see what I could create. And I wanted to create a space where people felt welcome, that we could help them heal. We've lost this sense of what it means to actually heal. And I think the mental health community has a much better grasp on that than the physical medical community, the traditional medical community. And but we've kind of, and I did a lot of muscle work. So I saw a lot of athletes, I saw a lot of chronic pain, I saw a lot of um, chronic illness. So I really wanted to create a space where people could feel welcome and that was soft and was healing and that we could truly help people. And the same time, my curiosity was like, well, what can I do? Like, how big can I grow this? Like, how can I challenge myself with this and be smart about it? Not just idealistic, but also bring that intelligence to making the right decisions and learning as I go. And so that was really where a lot of that came from, was that I knew I wanted to be able to create something, and for better or worse, whether it succeeded or failed, it was going to be mine.
I love that. And I like when you said you don't like to be told what to do. I'm the same way. And I think a lot of us are because we want to create our own thing. But I love that you were able to do that. And I know you mentioned earlier, and even when I introduced you, you had a multi six-figure business as well that you
Mhm.
sold and then started your another business as well. What was
Mhm.
that
This
transition?
one.
Yes. So what was that transition like?
Yeah, so that was a few years transition. And in the middle of that was my burnout experience, because part of why we sold the practice was, I say we, but it was mine. But we had been taking care of a dear friend of ours and our neighbor who had Parkinson's disease. And he was, we loved him. He passed away just a few months ago. But he was just very dear to us, and he didn't have any family around. So we became his primary caregivers for with a lot of the chronic diseases. It's not so much like the steady decline, it's these big drops in deterioration where like you just don't bounce back. And so one of those big drops we were really managing. So he had to go to the hospital, we had rehabilitation services, and he was a veteran, and so we had dual benefits, VA and Medicare. So I was the one that was organizing all of this, about a dozen people, getting him back into his home. And it was, a couple of very intense months. And I had also, like, I had just hired my first other associate, so we were focusing on work. It was just a lot. And so once we got him squared away and we got all the people in place to help with the caregiving, my husband and I, we went to a friend's house. They had a ski house in Vermont. So we went up there and just crashed and like drank a ton of wine and had pizza and like all of this. And we realized we wanted a family. And we both had big jobs at the time. And we decided that we needed to create the space for what we wanted. We had already started our fertility struggles, and we were like, well, we just needed to create the space. I was already getting pretty tired. And so we did that. And I had been doing some research we live outside of Providence and Brown University. So I've been doing some research with them, and they wanted a chiropractor in their lifestyle medicine department. So it just worked out that I could go a much less stressful environment. But there's about maybe a 5-year span there where we had our son, COVID hit, and I hit the wall. But I had already started knowing, as I had mentioned before, like I knew I wanted to transition out of patient care. And meditation and mindfulness had always been a big part of our life. I'd been working with a meditation coach for years, and found the SMART program, which is the one that I teach now, which is very lifestyle medicine based. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And so there was some reshuffling at the corporate healthcare where I was, and I had the choice to go back into private practice or do this. And here I am. And it gives me a lot more flexibility with my son. He's got an event at school today, so I can make that. Like, I just wanted to have that balance in my life. And it's been great. I love working with my clients. I love, the coaching role. I love teaching the class, and, we're doing really well. We're doing really well. So,
And I love that. And I love that you were really honest with yourself, you and your husband, of like what it looks like in
mhm.
that space versus just kind of diving in or not having that kind of like framework or road ahead of like what that might look like. Obviously, it changed over time, and COVID changed a lot of things. Pregnancy changes things. Having a child and him growing up now and what that looks like, but being present. And I'm really curious, what were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome in that process? Something that maybe people don't really know that you've had to go through.
In the process of starting the like going through burnout myself,
All of it. Yeah.
all of it.
All
Well,
encompassing.
there's been a lot of shifts, and I think and I'm not sure where this came from, but somewhere along the way, I really made the distinction between success and achievement. And I think that with achievement, those are goals that you set and reach. But success is a much deeper feeling of worthiness, of self-worth, of contribution, of purpose, those that deep-seated, why am I here? And whether you are fulfilling what you want to be doing here. And when I was able to really separate those two things out, then things like the money part of business was in the achievement part, but that was not tied to whether I felt like I was being successful, because the success part was in the quality of care we were giving. The success part was, are we fulfilling our mission statement as a business? And am I fulfilling my mission statement as a person? And so being able to make that distinction for me was really important, and I take that with me now because it's very easy, especially in business, to get caught up in some of the nuts and bolts of it, specifically the finances and the money. If you have a product to sell, like all of the things that go along with inventory and that type of thing, and the marketing, that is always going to be there. And that's really important, where you set your marks and you set your goals as a person and as a company to be able to see where you're going to be, because you need that congruency and that focus. But that is separate from, are we succeeding in what we've wanted to achieve in our communities and in this world? That is separate. And making that distinction has been a pivotal shift in my whole approach to this.
Mm. I love that. And it's that mindset shift too of what achievement and success looks like for you, but also for others as well. And I love that you brought up community, because I feel like community and support are so important in this process of just building a business, being
Mhm.
a mom, being a wife, being just an ambitious woman as well. But I'm really curious, what role does community play in preventing burnout, and how can entrepreneurs really cultivate that supportive network that fosters that professional and personal growth?
Yeah, it's a great question. And community is really everything. We said in the beginning that burnout is really an environmental issue. And what I mean by that is, here's the analogy, right? You can have this, picture a tree, a very healthy tree, and that tree can get everything that it needs. It has the sunlight it needs, it has the nutrients from the soil, it has the water that it needs, it has everything, and it is super healthy in this forest of trees. But if you light a match, that tree will still burn. And so that was where I was exercising every day. I was eating right. I was doing my meditation. I was getting as much sleep. I was really, like, as an individual, was really checking all the boxes. But when you are asked to give more than you can get back, that's when you start getting burned out. And that's what I mean when it's an environmental problem. It's where you live. It's the relationships that you have personally. It's the relationships that you have at the workplace. It's the relationships that you have within the community. And so those are the key, really, to preventing burnout. You have your role as well, because you're going to decide where you spend that energy. And that's, again, like taking these bigger concepts and being able to do some evaluations to quantify them so we have data to work with. That's hugely important. But community is such a huge part. And community and relationships, our personal relationships, our workplace relationships, and our community-based relationships, that's where we are giving and getting back. And so that's really going to be sustaining us. And it's everything. And we get to define what that is. You don't need a whole, I don't have a lot of friends, I got a couple really good ones, and I have wonderful sisters, and that's great. You don't have to have this huge network. You need one person, really. And that can be your community. But you have to be able to get something back from that in a way that you give as well.
Absolutely. It's give and take. And I agree. I love the analogy of the tree, because it just gives it such context of how we can really burn out. We can have everything we need, but the
Mhm.
moment the environment can explode around us as well.
Mhm.
But having that community and support, and it can be just one person, because that's all we need. I used to say that as a therapist too, just like
Yeah,
with people, it's just having that one person you can talk to, or not like trauma dump or like unload emotionally,
no.
but being able to have a safe space where you have that support, and it's give and take in both aspects. But I think that's so key and so important. And I think it's part, sometimes people feel a little bit like guilty or selfish for asking for help, especially when it comes to where burnout can come from if you aren't asking or saying what you need, because then nobody knows. Nobody's a mind reader unless you're
Mhm.
psychic, but then still you don't fully know. But I'm really curious, because entrepreneurs listening, a lot of them have had some resistance and troubles in their journey, obstacles we've had to face in different capacities. It's never a linear road. But I'm really curious, how can entrepreneurs overcome resistance to prioritizing their own needs without feeling guilty or selfish, especially in those high pressure environments?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it goes back to really what what is it that you want? Reevaluating what are your values, what is your purpose? And also, one of the things that we do is we shift from task-based decision making to energy-based decision making. So we literally, like, one of the exercises that we do is just take a piece of paper, make two columns, like little T, plus for charges, negative for drains, and then you just start listing what are the things that give you energy and everything. And this is a no judgment, right? This is not a measure of your love, not a measure of your commitment, not a measure of anything. It's just sitting with that in a quiet room and listening to your body and listening to your gut and saying, okay, I have a 4-year-old, love him more than life itself, would die for this kid, would kill for this kid. He is fantastic, light of my life, big plus. He's also 4 years old. And so he is a little draining sometimes. There are, I don't need to justify it. I don't need to explain it. Like, if you know, you know. But you need to understand that there is some energy draws there that if you have a tough day together, that you're going to need to then allocate some time for recovery. And so when you start looking at what is sustainable, rather than I need this and I'm going to take this because it's mine, but rather you are the center of everything. You need to be sustainable. And so that is for your business and for your life. It becomes a much easier task to say, today I'm doing X, Y, and Z because yesterday, A, B, and C happened. But understanding what your own individual needs are with that and where your triggers are and what drains you and what brings you joy, that's very personal, but that's really what centers all of this.
I love that you brought up the sustainability piece because I think a lot of times, like I used to be like this, and I know other people like this too, where they'll just like do everything at once and then they
Mhm.
burn out because it's not sustainable long term. And just having those small moments, and I've like had to learn how to take breaks over the last like 8 years. Like, well, that was the last time I burnt out, like 7, 8 years ago. But being able to realize, okay, it's okay to take a 5 minute break, and
Yeah.
that's sustainable. It's okay to like make sure that you're maybe prepping meals or doing stuff or having snacks available so you're recharging and nourishing your mind and your body, because you can't keep going on E. And I felt like I was always on E. And I know so many other entrepreneurs that are just like, okay, I got to go, or it's just one more thing, just I got to get this done. And then they don't sleep. And then all the other things that happen physically and mentally by not taking care of ourselves, but doing stuff that you know you can do on a regular basis makes
Mhm.
all the difference. And that's part of self care. And it can look different as well. Self care can be boundaries, it can be having that
Mhm.
communication aspect with your spouse or your friends or your family, whoever's in your community and your circle, knowing that it's not about them, it's about what you need in that moment, and like
Mhm.
respecting and honoring that. And that's what I was hearing from you as well, of just creating that space for us to do things that are tangible and consistent, because that's what's
Mhm.
going to make the biggest change. And I know you've already like given us so much insight of just your experience and whatnot, and I know we could talk for hours, but I'm really curious because I know you've probably had a lot of lessons along the way in this journey of just building two successful businesses, raising a child, being married, having your beautiful community that you do have. But is there a lesson you wish you had learned earlier in your entrepreneurial journey? And how can you
Mhm.
share that wisdom to benefit others that are on a similar path?
Yes, you have two choices with this. You are either going to learn what your stress triggers are, what your burnout triggers are, what they look like, what they feel like, and then understand what you need to do to recover during that time. And that is the key, is like not letting this fester and build. You have to set that time aside to recover in that moment or soon after. You either are going to figure that out, or you will have to have a longer recovery at some point and you're going to crash. Like those are the two options that you have. And many people they make it till retirement until they crash, or but eventually you can only give so much before you're going to need to replenish. And our bodies, our systems, our biological being part of us is set up for that sustainability. And that is where your sleep comes in, your exercise comes in. We have all of the mechanisms within us to be able to have those recovery sessions as they come. But we've become very out of our own body, out of tune with our body. We don't know what it means to listen to our body. We've become afraid of our own thoughts in a way. And so learning how to just embrace all of you and recognize all of it without any judgment and just being curious and bringing in some solutions to it, that is really the key. And I think not being afraid of my own thoughts, not being afraid to say, like, this is a really negative, toxic thought that we have. And it's very easy to toxify some of the motivation that we have, the dig deep. I can't, like, that would resonate in my mind, but I didn't need to dig deep. It's not what I needed. And so, like, yes, it's motivating, but it's not what I needed at the time. And being able to distinguish those two things was really important.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point because it can change different phases of our life versus starting
Mhm.
a business, starting a family, moving, changing directions in a business, pivoting, anything that comes up. It's just really looking at taking those moments of, okay, well, what is it that I need in this moment and starting to identify it. I always say it's like you need a toolbox. Not every tool is going to work each time, but what is it that you need in that moment? And I always think of it in like, this is like psychology aspect, but am I hungry? Am I tired?
Yeah.
Do I need water? Do I need sunlight? Like, what are those things that I need in the moment? Have I done all of that? Like what we were talking about earlier, you could do all those things, but maybe it's something different. But really being able to recognize what those triggers are and being
Mhm.
honest and transparent with yourself first and foremost, because somebody else can tell you, oh, it's this or it's that, but like for you to identify that yourself
Yeah.
and stand in that and realize that, because the recovery time, you're right, like even now being pregnant, I'm like, okay, I need to take certain breaks, and knowing like my body can't do what it did prior to being pregnant in this moment. I'll get back to that, but it's just even like I'm out of breath half the time and I'm like, okay, you know what, just take a break, have some water. It's like the
Yeah.
little things. It's the little things.
Well, and the beautiful part about it is, like, it's about learning about yourself. Like, it's this whole other level of understanding yourself and self-discovery. Like, that's so much of it is just understanding what makes you tick and why. And, and it's a moving target because we're not the same person today that we were yesterday. We've been shaped by our experiences and what's happened to us. And so being able to have that understanding of, like, what is your core essence? Who is that? And what is consistent and congruent throughout the entire life? And then how are these things shaping that? That's the cool part about it.
Yes, I love it. I mean, oh, I want to talk more about that, but I, so I know you've already like accomplished so much in your lifetime, but I'm really curious, what is your long-term vision for your business, for your clients to sustain both that personal success as well as that personal well-being? How can other entrepreneurs create that? But I'm curious, first and foremost, what is your long-term vision for your
Yeah. When I started this business, I set some criteria for myself, and they were very simple. I wanted a high six-figure to seven-figure business. I wanted just to see if I could build it. And I also wanted unlimited earning potential. I wanted to be able to work from home. Actually, what I had said was I want to be able to work from a sailboat. I married a sailor. And so, we love being on the water. And so we have these ideas of, chartering around the world to see the different parts and taking our son on trips. And so we want to be able to have that flexibility. And so those were my big things. Now that's shifted a little bit because my parents are getting older and I just want to be able to be there for them. And I want to be able to have the flexibility to work from their home if I need to, but still like be able to give them all the stuff that they need as they get older too.
I love that. Oh, so cool. Just like thinking of what is possible. And I think that's the beautiful thing of being an entrepreneur. You
Uh-huh.
can create your own path. It's not a one size fits all. And I say that probably like every single day to somebody because I do believe it's so unique to what we want, what we need, and also the dynamic around us as well. And that can
Yeah.
change. Life can change very quickly. But how do you adapt to that? How do you really look at that vision? You have the vision, it might be the path might be a little bit different to get there, but you can still have that and continue to move forward. And I've been so enjoying this conversation, Dr. Moore, but I would love to know, where can people find you, find your services? We're gonna link
Yeah.
everything below, but if you could let us know too.
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. Camilla Moore, you can find me there. You can also find me on Instagram. I'm pretty active there every day. Dr. Camilla Moore on Instagram. You can find me there. I think you're going to have some links. We do have a quiz that if people want to learn their work-life balance IQ, their risk for burnout, if you want to do that, it's just a very short quiz, but it starts that process that we were talking about. If it resonates with you, this is what you're going to want to do. Is it starts taking kind of these feelings that you know deep down and putting them on paper so that you can actually see what they look like and see what they mean. And those are the big places that you can find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Camilla, for being here today, just sharing your journey with us, the ups, downs, everything in between, at least the cusp of it. I know there's so much
Yeah.
more we could have talked about, but I'm so glad we had the opportunity to sit down and just share what you've been up to, how you're really changing the world when it comes to burnout for women in particular, but just being able to really integrate our work and life and still thrive in every aspect of our life. Maybe not all at once, but at least being able to encompass it all. So thank you for being
Thank you.
here.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was great.
Absolutely. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment below. What was the biggest takeaway from Dr. Camilla today? I'm sure she would love to see that comment, and we will see you on the next episode.